Problem number 9. So the directions say we have a single term on the bottom and we want to distribute that single term to both of the pieces on the top. In other words, we want to split up the fraction sine x over sine x plus cosecant x over sine x. And then after doing that, we want to simplify each fraction. Of course, the first one is just a 1, sine x divided by sine x. The second one, I guess what I could do is I could reciprocate that sine x to the top, making it another cosecant x, and so I would have cosecant squared x. In other words, I don't even have to have a fraction there. Here would be the simplified final answer. Letter B, same idea, distribute that cosine squared x to both pieces. And then we'll do some simplifying. In the first fraction, the 2 cosines on the bottom cancel out 2 of the ones on the top. In the second one, the 1 on the top cancels out 1 of the ones on the bottom. So I end up here with cosine x minus 1 over cosine x. And again, I don't really need to keep a fraction there. 1 over cosine x is just secant x. Problem number 10, we're being given some complex fractions. That just means fractions that contain fractions. We're being asked to simplify using a specific method. This is the method where you look at all the little fractions, you find the LCD, and then you multiply the big top and bottom by that LCD. So in part A, the only little fraction I have is 2 over cosine x. So the LCD obviously is just the cosine x. I'm going to take that and I'm going to multiply this big numerator by cosine x and this big denominator by cosine x. Technically, there's 3 items that I'm multiplying here. When I multiply the 1, that's very easy. On the bottom, I'm going to have to do some distributing in. Well, when I multiply cosine x times 2 over cosine x, the cosine x's cancel. I would just have the 2 left. And then 1 times cosine x, of course, is just cosine x. Okay, can I go any further? Well, only if I can factor these pieces. The problem is 2 minus cosine x doesn't factor, and there's no 2 minus cosine x's on the top, so this is as good as it gets. Part B, I have 2 little fractions. They both have a sine x in the denominator, so obviously that's the LCD. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to multiply the big numerator by sine x and the big denominator by sine x. Once again, it looks like there's 3 pieces that need to be multiplied. On the top, the sine x's cancel, leaving me with just 1. On the bottom, I will have to distribute. Let's see, when I do that first multiplication, once again the sine x's will cancel, leaving me with 1. When I do the second multiplication, I get 1 times sine x, which is sine x. Once again, I'm stuck at this point. 1 plus sine x doesn't factor. It's its own factor. I don't have any matches on the top, and so here's the final answer. In problem 11, we want to simplify each expression. We'll start by factoring the top and bottom and then seeing if we have any common factors. So when I look at part A, on the top I see that I have a GCF I can pull out. So let me go ahead and do that. On the bottom, do I also have a GCF? Yes, I do. I have a sine x that I can pull out to the front, leaving me with 1 plus tangent x. And then, of course, this one works out very nicely. I have a common factor of 1 plus tangent x that I can divide out top and bottom, leaving me with just 4 over sine x. I don't need to keep the fraction here. I can reciprocate the sine x to the top as cosecant x, and here then is about the simplest way I can write this, 4 cosecant x. How about part B? Can I factor the top? Well, I don't see a GCF, but I do see 3 terms, and that makes me think this may have been somebody's FOIL problem. It would have to be sine x and sine x in the front to make sine squared x. It would have to be 3 and 1 at the back to make that 3. How could I make that minus 4 in the middle? If I do a minus 3 sine x for the inner and a minus 1 sine x for the outer, that makes minus 4 sine x. And negative 3 times negative 1 is still positive 3, so that worked great. The bottom does not factor, so I'll just put a parenthesis around it to remind myself, therefore it's its own factor. And of course, that means I have a common factor. I can divide this sine x minus 3 with this sine x minus 3. I don't have a fraction left anymore. All I have is sine x minus 1 as the final answer.